My 25 great-grandparents don't show up to my kids' birthday parties. I don't want to invite them anymore. I also don't care much about showing up for holidays or their birthdays, but they have an issue with it because they've brought it up passively multiple times. They do not attend my children's birthday parties because there are people present who make them uncomfortable. I have a 3-year-old and an almost 1-year-old. They have been invited to the first and second birthdays of my eldest child, though we were not on speaking terms for the second birthday. They live 2.5 hours away. They do, however, attend the birthday parties of their other great-grandchildren. They only have one, and he recently celebrated his first birthday, which they hosted. The summary is at the bottom. Long backstory if you need details or answers. There has been a considerable amount of drama over the past 5 years with my family, particularly involving these grandparents, who are my mother's parents. I do not communicate with my 50-year-old mother due to a long list of issues, and whenever I did interact with her, I struggled with self-confidence, questioned reality, and felt worse regarding my depression, mood, and anxiety. I have had an inconsistent relationship with these grandparents for 5 years. We mutually stopped communicating this last time because they were involved in blaming me for my parents' divorce, which, to be honest, I do not care about. I do speak with my 50-year-old father, which has caused issues on my mother's side. He has faced trouble for speaking with me. Fast forward. I have been in minimal contact with my grandparents since December 2023 due to an accident on my part. I mistakenly texted my grandfather when I intended to reach out to my father to inform him that we were almost at his location. My daughter had been talking about her papa, referring to my dad, so I accidentally began a text to my grandfather instead, forgetting I was not messaging my dad. They ceased communication with me after being told by my mother that I had blocked them. There may be other reasons I am unaware of. As I mentioned, I had also stopped talking to them when I discovered they were part of a family meeting that blamed me for my parents' divorce. I know this is true because, the day before the meeting, my sister and I had a phone conversation that ended our relationship again. She suggested I was attempting to instigate their divorce. She believed I only aided my dad by providing marijuana so he would divorce my mom. To clarify, he has a medical card, making it legal for him to possess it, but he lives in a different state where the prices are significantly inflated. We only live 2.5 hours apart, so I was saving him hundreds on a medicine he requires regardless. However, my assistance in saving him money was twisted into the notion that it was my intent to facilitate their divorce, which they had been discussing since I was 5. I do not understand why they would blame me for this at the age of 22. Furthermore, no one is aware that I know about the family meeting. I want to discuss this with my grandparents, but my dad believes it would only worsen matters. At first, he advised against it, but later he simply expressed his preference for me not to bring it up. 3 years have passed, and I genuinely cannot heal from it because it was so chaotic and hurtful, especially since it involved people who are supposed to be family. I desire an apology and a commitment that such events will never happen again. I believe this unresolved situation has caused me to harbor more resentment towards them than I should. However, if I ever consider discussing it with them, I feel they will suddenly use Alzheimer's as an excuse again, which I will explain in the next paragraph, or claim they do not remember or outright deny it. Then, I become the villain for calling out their actions. This creates an internal struggle for me, leading me to feel easily irritated by them. Since my grandparents found out they were not actually blocked by me in December 2023 due to my text, I received a phone call from my grandmother a few days later. She called me, and when I answered, she asked, "Who is this?" I reminded her that she was the one who called me and stated my name. The conversation quickly devolved into silly excuses for not communicating with me, like claiming my grandfather is forgetful and is developing Alzheimer's disease, which terrifies her because if they do not see us, he might forget who we are. She made me feel guilty by discussing heart and back problems, which I sarcastically noted seem to have been cured since they are no longer mentioned. He appears completely normal to me every time we see them. According to my grandmother, he only began to have these issues when our communication was minimal. I do not even know if he is aware that she made those remarks about him. The more I write, the more frustrated I become that I am even talking to them again. However, we had not spoken for over a year, and now I receive a call asking who was present at my house and how they have numerous health problems. Current situation regarding whether I am the asshole. I was informing them about my second child's upcoming first birthday at the end of April. Supposedly, my grandmother told me that my parents are getting divorced in mid-March. I did not initially believe it because they have been discussing divorce for so long. My father did not inform me, so I have no idea if it is true. I do not trust everything my grandmother says. She mentioned that if it is a contentious divorce requiring witnesses, they do not want to create an awkward situation with my father's side at the party. Later in the phone call, the excuse switched to their not wanting to see my father for fear that if he smelled like marijuana vape, my grandfather might react negatively, potentially causing drama. I responded by suggesting they simply refrain from bringing it up. If they cannot avoid making offensive remarks, perhaps they should not attend. Previously, they expressed concern about being shunned. I inquired, "By whom?" She replied it was my father's side. However, they have never been shunned by anyone before, so I asked why she would think that. The conversation went something like this. "Well, your dad shunned me before." "Really? Can you elaborate, please?" "Well, at your sister's birth, he wouldn't talk to me." "Well, you said it was a really traumatic birth, so perhaps he was not in the mood to talk. You also mentioned earlier that he and your mother had just had an argument." "I have never observed him being rude or shunning anyone." "Well, I asked him about the time after a long period of silence." "And did he ignore you?" "No," he answered. "Nana, that's not shunning if he did not ignore you. So if none of my father's family approaches her and speaks to her for her, that counts as being shunned." Then I provided her with a real example of what shunning actually entails. The first time I saw my mother after getting married, she refused to look at me or my husband for several minutes. My father sarcastically introduced us by saying, "So this is my name and my husband's name," while introducing us to my mother. My grandmother replied, "Well, I was not there, so I do not know." I can understand feeling uncomfortable around the other side of the family during a divorce. However, why miss out on significant life events for your grandchildren? They do care about visiting them, just in private at parks or my church. They also want us to visit them during holidays. My grandmother mentioned Easter, which is 4 days before my child's birthday, and even said we were welcome to celebrate my baby's birthday at their home. I do not wish to go there. I have no desire to do so. We have visited them around Christmas when it coincides with our travels because we pass through their town on the way home, but that is the extent of my interest in holiday gatherings with them. I asked her that if she is not attending my children's birthdays due to feeling uncomfortable, what will happen during significant life events such as sports, recitals, or graduations? She did not provide an answer to that. I do not believe it is favoritism, but rather a fear of incurring trouble with my mother, their 50-year-old daughter. I mentioned this to her because it has been a consistent issue multiple times. She denied this was the case, but her reasoning for not wanting to attend my child's birthday fluctuated several times, leaving me uncertain of the true reason for their absence, as there was no clear response. An example of my mother being the cause for their absence at my child's birthday is that none of my family attended my wedding in 2019 because they feared being disowned if they did so. The situation was still fresh and chaotic for them since I moved out in February, got engaged in March, and wanted to marry in April. I had intended to move out long before meeting my husband, by the way, but we postponed the wedding several times in hopes my mother would change her mind. I eventually learned she never would, and we were married in July. I have never maintained a good relationship with my mother. Perhaps the years before I turned 5 were acceptable, but I remember many toxic and painful experiences, including a great deal of emotional abuse throughout the following years. I also feel frustrated that they do not attend my children's birthdays because my grandmother has manipulated me into visiting family members who have caused me significant hurt in the past, urging me to be like Jesus and to take the high road. The relatives are people with whom I had not communicated in a long time. She even attempted to persuade me to apologize to my mother after the wedding, but I refused because I had no idea what I would be apologizing for. Several times, I ended up yielding to her wishes because I felt guilty and wanted to be a good person. Yet she will not reciprocate that behavior for my children or for me. Summary. Am I the asshole for not wanting to visit my great-grandparents' home for their birthdays or holidays when they do not seem inclined to be present for my children, despite their willingness to attend for their other great-grandchildren? Am I wrong for not inviting them to future birthdays, knowing I would receive a phone call filled with flimsy excuses, or because they simply do not feel comfortable? My mindset is this: I know the answer is no, so why extend an invitation? My husband suggests inviting them out of kindness, but I honestly do not want to make an effort for someone who is unlikely to show up. Therefore, I may be viewed as the asshole for that stance. I am conflicted between feeling guilty and justified because they are aging, yet I find myself growing increasingly frustrated with them, beginning to feel like a bad person. I would like to know if my feelings are justified. Additionally, how do others manage relationships with manipulative and deceitful family members? Story 2. The end of a 10-year friendship between my best friend, 29F, and me, 29F. Looking for advice on setting boundaries, achieving closure, and navigating the future at group events, etc. My former best friend, female, age 29, and I, female, age 29, became friends in college nearly 10 years ago. After graduating from college, I moved away, but we remained in relatively close contact, seeing each other at least once a year, either by visiting one another or as part of our larger college friend group vacations that we have every few years. We have experienced our ups and downs over the years, but regardless, we have always bounced back to our usual banter. Throughout college and after, she has consistently had a tendency to become upset, jealous, and passive-aggressive when I and our other close girlfriends would grow close and spend time together without her. This behavior also occurred even when we were all together, but she felt excluded. I have generally attempted to be understanding whenever this situation arose. Over time, I learned to be more empathetic, even when she would attempt to guilt me and others regarding her feelings. However, as the two of us and others in our friend group have matured after college, I believe many of us have engaged in significant soul-searching and have learned to set better boundaries, particularly concerning what type of treatment we will accept from individuals who are supposed to be our friends. This issue reached a climax when the two of us and our other very close friend recently went on a girls' backpacking trip out of the country. We were genuinely excited and spent months preparing for it, getting very enthusiastic because it truly was a once-in-a-lifetime trip. I believe that this is where the problem began. My other friend, female, age 29, and I were approaching this as a once-in-a-lifetime backpacking experience and a chance to challenge ourselves both mentally and physically. It was an added bonus that we could all participate together. The subject friend, female, age 28, is not the most adventurous person, and this trip was quite out of her comfort zone. She was primarily undertaking this adventure because she wanted to spend time with us and, honestly, due to a fear of missing out. That is completely fair and reasonable. For the most part, we enjoyed the first few days leading up to the hike, but there were numerous occasions when my other friend and I would begin discussing something, and because the subjects did not align with her interests, she would become silent and sulky. When we tried to include her in the conversation or solicit her opinions, she would roll her eyes and deliver a sarcastic remark, only to later claim that she felt excluded, despite our active efforts to include her. One night, we played a game during which she became very aggressive, which had also occurred on one of our previous group trips, and then she started being unkind to our other friend. When the other friend attempted to stand up for herself, the subject friend tried to portray herself as the victim, even though she had been the aggressive one from the start, and our other friend had done nothing but call her out for her unkind behavior. Keep in mind that we are almost 30. We moved past that incident and began the hike the following day, meeting some new friends in our tour group along the way. Right from the start, as we began the hike and mingled with new friends, the subject friend started panicking. We hung back with her because her reaction was not unreasonable. The hike was challenging at first, and reality was setting in about what we were about to undertake. Eventually, our other friend hiked ahead a bit, and the subject friend began making passive-aggressive remarks about that. Then we arrived at dinner, where I sat next to the subject friend, while our other friend sat across from us at a table with many other individuals in our group. As our other friend and I recounted how challenging yet wonderful our first day was, the subject friend immediately began becoming upset and giving us the silent treatment. The following day, we were presented with the option of hiking an easier or harder trail, and I was very eager to undertake it. However, the subject friend was being excessively negative, making remarks such as, "I am just being realistic. I do not believe you will be able to do it," failing to realize that our other friend and I were holding back for her. It is one thing to ask us to engage in an activity together, and another to be a downer when the primary purpose of the trip for 2/3 of us was to challenge ourselves. Shortly thereafter, both my other friend and I became ill, likely due to food poisoning, and were basically incapacitated and unable to hike for a day. The subject friend attempted to make us feel guilty for our sickness, claiming that she felt left out. We were genuinely unwell. She then suggested that we should ask her not to go hiking the next day, which made no sense for us to do. Her choices were her own. Ultimately, she chose to go hiking. We eventually regrouped, but the passive-aggressive comments continued, along with her frustration when we walked with other people, even when my other friend and I were not together. At that point, it became quite exhausting and was the only part of the trip that genuinely dampened our experience, especially given that we had been throwing up and felt extremely ill for over 24 hours of the hike. On the final day of the trip, she displayed the same behavior, and I was fed up, becoming slightly irritable and asking her what she wanted to say and to express it outright, which led to her crying. Our other friend took a gentler approach, and we attempted to move forward. My other friend and I ultimately expressed our feelings during our last few hours together at the airport, yet the subject friend continued to avoid taking any accountability and behaved as if she were a victim when, in reality, she possesses numerous insecurities she needs to address. The trip was both emotionally and physically exhausting and challenging, so I do not blame her for feeling off. The issue was that she consistently exhibited her typical behavior in any situation where she did not receive complete attention. It became clear to me that the friendship was draining me while offering little in return. The only reason our friendship had lasted as long as it did was due to the dynamic within our larger friend group. Since the trip, I have not communicated with her or responded to her messages. I do not feel that I owe her any further explanation, especially given her complete lack of accountability. Fast forward to today. She called and left a voicemail, expressing that she has not heard from me and wondered if she has been unfriended. This is quite perplexing to me. Generally, I understand that sometimes individuals fail to realize they have done something wrong, and it may be beneficial to communicate this to them. My concern is that I feel as though my other friend and I were quite clear regarding our feelings about her treatment of us on that trip, and I do not believe it is our responsibility to assist her in understanding this. I still have not replied, but my main concern is that I will have to see her at some of our mutual friends' upcoming weddings, and I worry I will have to confront her at that time. Honestly, I have no desire to reconstruct our friendship. Although I will certainly be polite, I anticipate some level of awkwardness or a scene occurring. Consequently, I am seeking perspective on whether others have experienced long-term friendships coming to an end, and how you navigated this situation while attempting to avoid toxicity. Additionally, I am hoping for advice on how to handle those initial encounters that will inevitably occur as we attend similar events and gatherings, such as weddings. I have been hesitant to discuss this with the other friend who was on the trip with us, because I do not want to influence her perspective or make her feel as though I am prolonging this situation or trying to sway her to take sides. I believe she and I are generally aligned in our feelings, but we both have different friendships with her outside of our group. Therefore, I want to allow them to resolve their issues without playing a role in that, to the best of my ability. Story 3. I bought 34 six-packs for a work party, thinking 5 beers per person was normal. My boss texted, "The party is drowning." 2 details about me that are essential to this narrative. 1. I was raised by an individual who struggled with alcoholism, and 2. I do not consume alcohol. Last week, my supervisor requested that I purchase alcohol for a departmental celebration. I informed her that I might not be the appropriate person for the task, since I do not drink, and therefore am unfamiliar with what people generally enjoy or how much to buy. She replied that I should simply buy whatever I felt was best, assuring me it would be acceptable, and handed me the corporate credit card. I attempted to reflect on my upbringing. As I do not drink, I never socialized at bars during college, and my only benchmark for understanding how much people drink was my father. I recalled that it was typically after beer number 6 that Dad would become quite jovial. This was so notable in our lives that my brother and I referred to it as the 6-beer smile. It is important to note that my father didn't always stop after 6. Sometimes he drank 10 or more in a day. Therefore, I reasoned, well, Dad drank quite a bit, so I believe 5 bottles of beer per person will suffice since that is just one less than a smile. I called my older brother to confirm whether 5 beers per person would be an adequate amount for a work event, and he concurred, saying, yes, that seems about right. The department consists of 40 individuals, so I ended up purchasing approximately 34 6-packs. I opted for a mix of types because, why not? Even though it was expensive, this company wastes money on numerous other items, so I figured this was just the cost associated with a party with alcohol. I filled my car, which took a considerable amount of time, drove to the office, and then transported everything to the large conference room that had been designated for the celebration. The event took place yesterday evening. I only lingered for a brief period, made appearances to wave hello and speak with the higher-ups so they recognized my attendance, and then I slipped out and went home early. Today, I woke up to several messages from my supervisor, predominantly consisting of, how much did you buy? The party is drowning. And finally, is there more in the cabinets? Indeed, when I initially delivered everything, I ran out of counter space and placed the remaining items in the cabinets. I consulted a few friends about why my boss was so distressed. They began to laugh and reminded me that my father struggled with alcoholism, and I probably should have opted for just 2 drinks per person, as that is considerably more standard for a work-related gathering. Summary: I procured 5 beers for each person at a work event, and I can only envision what the outcome was. However, although I should have been more careful, let's be honest, my supervisor was more at fault for requesting that the non-drinker handle the alcohol purchase. Update: February 24, 2025. I appreciate everyone for your comments. I particularly value those who reassured me it wasn't as bad as it seemed, as well as those who offered advice for the future. I became somewhat overwhelmed by the number of responses, so I apologize if I didn't reply to your comment, but I am grateful for all of them. A few clarifications. I reside in the United States, and the region I am in tends to have a more conservative or religious perspective. People here drink, obviously, but indulging in drunkenness amongst colleagues, for example, is generally frowned upon. I have learned that this perspective varies significantly depending on where you are in the world. Additionally, the definition of alcoholism differs greatly from person to person. My father was, and is, a sorrowful, angry man, and from my experiences, alcohol served as an extremely unstable means for him to cope with his anger and grief. For those who were concerned about my colleagues consuming warm beer from the counter, someone did put the beverages on ice between when I delivered them and when the event commenced. Again, I typically prefer to leave work gatherings as soon as possible. I would rather spend my free time with friends or my brother. It became clear that the party was somewhat of a misnomer from my boss, and as someone pointed out in the comments, it was more of a casual after-work social event where the intention was for people to come and go or stay for a while. Nonetheless, I was the first person in the office. My boss, let's refer to her as Kathy, arrived a bit agitated, so I would like to thank the Redditors who provided me with insightful responses for her. Initially, Kathy inquired why I hadn't replied to her texts, and I explained that I do not check work-related messages during the weekends. Then she questioned what I was thinking by purchasing so much expensive alcohol, and as many suggested, I stated, I told you I don't drink, and I wasn't sure how much to get, so I intended to ensure there was enough variety available. I offered the corporate credit card back to her, which she accepted before retreating to her office and closing the door. Several individuals stopped by my cubicle to mention that the party was enjoyable and that I should have stayed longer. Word evidently spread that I was responsible for the arrangement, as one gentleman suggested I should always take charge of bringing the beverages. Kathy's door remained closed throughout the morning. I began to feel a bit anxious because, aside from the cost, it appeared that everyone had a great time. Ultimately, I decided to approach my boss's supervisor, let's call him Brian, to check in on whether everything was all right. According to Brian, everyone found the random assortment of beer to be quite pleasant. After I left the gathering, which was as soon as I could, that was when they discovered the variety available in the cooler. One individual started searching until they found a beer they preferred, which encouraged others to do the same. Brian mentioned it was amusing when someone opened the cabinets and shouted, "There's more," which I must admit is fairly entertaining. I informed Brian that Kathy appeared extremely upset about the entire situation. Brian explained that Kathy was quite upset on Friday and continued to express regret regarding how much I overspent. I responded that I had no idea there was a budget, and he laughed. It was then that I learned the budget for drinks was approximately 100, while I spent around 440. I provided Brian with the same brief explanation I had given Kathy. I don't drink and wasn't certain what or how much to buy. I inquired whether he wanted me to return any unopened 6-packs, and Brian advised me not to worry about it, assuring me he would speak to Kathy. On a slightly different but related note, some of you found my brother's response to be hilarious, while others regarded it as concerning, and I honestly found it both ways too. I spoke to my brother after getting home from work, and we had a very good conversation. He revealed that he did not take my inquiry seriously and that his response was sarcastic, so when I recounted the entire story, he found the situation quite amusing. We also discussed the effect of our fathers drinking on both of us. I will not go into extensive detail, but he reassured me that nowadays, he only drinks in moderation with friends, and even then, not often. I ensured that he knows I am here for him if he ever needs to talk. Update summary. My colleagues enjoyed themselves. My boss panicked about exceeding the budget, but her supervisor found the surplus amusing and told me not to be concerned. Most importantly, my brother is doing well and is not following in our father's footsteps. Story 4. How do I, 24F, deal with my 25M boyfriend's friend, his twin brother's girlfriend, 26F? I have been with my boyfriend for 4 years now, and honestly, these have been the most rewarding years of my life. Our relationship is not perfect, but it is wonderful. One of the more challenging aspects of our relationship, however, has been navigating interactions with my boyfriend's twin brother's girlfriend, whom I will refer to as Lex. From the very beginning, I sensed an underlying tension. There is a continual flow of passive-aggressive remarks, judgment, and criticism from her that leave me feeling insignificant and, frankly, foolish. I am an indigenous Mexican woman, and Lex is white. I have never had white friends and have always found it difficult to connect with them, which led me to believe that it was a personal shortcoming on my part, or that I was simply being difficult. Therefore, I made a concerted effort to be open and kind. When I first encountered her, we were at a small gathering where the topic of privilege arose. I recounted a story about how I had been told to return to my country for speaking my native language, or how teachers would assume I was unable to speak English. We all shared a laugh. And then she shared an experience about her job where an Asian girl had asked her how she managed to pay for college, and how this made her feel guilty for having parents who could support her. The atmosphere grew awkwardly quiet, and the conversation shifted to another topic. I vividly recall the first time I met my boyfriend's friends. Right away, I felt excluded by the girls, who ignored me and even dismissed me when I made an effort to engage. I attempted to be friendly and initiate conversation, but they paid me no attention. My boyfriend noticed and quickly distanced himself from them, as he had never seen them behave that way before. The guys were pleasant, but those girls were not fond of me at all, with the exception of one girl who was genuinely kind. I longed for the girls to accept me or give their approval. Although it shouldn't matter, it is nice when your partner's friends appreciate you. Following that encounter, Lex confided in me that she had experienced similar issues, but was indifferent towards them, telling me that the girls definitely dislike me. She even speculated about why they might feel that way and what aspects of me they probably found unappealing, which made me feel awful. Then, she opened Instagram and went to one of the girls' profiles, mercilessly criticizing her for acting like an influencer. I found this behavior really strange because my perspective is that if you dislike someone, you simply don't engage with them, block and ignore. However, the real turning point occurred when my boyfriend and I had a significant disagreement. He confided in his brother, who subsequently shared everything with Lex. A few days later, at his cousin's Halloween party, Lex pulled me aside to ask how things were progressing with my boyfriend. Her tone was so condescending, as if she claimed some sort of authority over my relationship. She informed me that she knew how relationships operate, and went on to provide unsolicited advice on how I should conduct myself because she is best friends with my boyfriend. I held my tongue, knowing that engaging would only escalate the situation. I was extremely frustrated, and later that night, I shared everything with my boyfriend, who was upset because they are not best friends. Plus, they hardly communicate unless she is with their mutual friends or staying over at their apartment. I dismissed it and went out to dance, simply enjoying myself. Later, she commented on how some girls dress inappropriately or go overboard for attention. There were many confident women present, which I appreciated, and yes, I was dressed up. It struck me as odd, especially since she frequently discusses feminist issues. But what truly puzzled me was how she appeared to be forever searching for ways to undermine me. Things escalated when my boyfriend and his brother were filming a music video. I trust my boyfriend and consider myself quite secure in who I am. Surprisingly, I discovered that the lead singer and some dancers wore very alluring, stylish outfits. I was unaware until my boyfriend posted a teaser of behind-the-scenes footage and found it unremarkable since I clearly saw several crew members present, and it was just a job. Suddenly, Lex texted me asking if I had knowledge of this woman, the singer, and the shoot, accusing my boyfriend of flirting with the lead dancer. She shared screenshots of her conversation with a friend, framing the situation in a manner that suggested my boyfriend was in the wrong. I was aware of the context. I had seen clips of the video, and the lead dancer's boyfriend was present as well. Lex also made a fuss about the singer gifting them a bottle from her country. I decided to wait until the next day to discuss it with him, understanding that it was a long shoot and he would be too worn out. Poor guy. When I revealed this to him, he became so worried about me that he drove over to see me and showed me evidence proving that the girls' boyfriends were indeed on set. Once we talked it through, my boyfriend and I laughed it off, but it felt strange that Lex consistently found ways to stir the pot. From that moment on, I realized she only reached out to me when there was an issue with her boyfriend and wanted to know if I had similar experiences. Then, there was a situation in September. My boyfriend's family invited me to go to Mexico on vacation, but I could not make it. Out of the blue, I received a message from Lex inquiring if I had been invited, and I immediately recognized she was fishing for information about my relationship. She asked me whether my boyfriend had not informed me that he was going, expressing frustration at not being included. I explained that my boyfriend and his family had invited me months prior, but I was unable to go as I was starting a new job soon. It was evident she was seeking validation, but I maintained my distance since her issues with her boyfriend were hers to handle, not mine. I took a screenshot of her message and told my boyfriend that I had been honest with her and did not want to be involved, nor did I want his brother to think I was instigating. He advised me that she frequently behaves this way and to simply end the conversation. He was annoyed, so I politely suggested she speak to her boyfriend, as it may have just been a miscommunication. Not long after that, we attended a wedding where I caught Lex giving me an unsettling glance. When I winked at my boyfriend, she immediately asked if he had informed me that he was moving. This was just the latest in a series of questions that seemed more aimed at creating conflict rather than genuine communication. I responded that he had, and I was very excited. At the dinner table, his friends were incredibly kind and amusing, sharing their proposal stories. I mentioned to my boyfriend's friends, a couple, that after my boyfriend returned from their wedding, he came back with wedding fever and was already planning when he hadn't even proposed yet. They all chuckled, and I glanced at Lex and my boyfriend's brother. Lex's expression was serious, and she clearly did not find it amusing. There are certainly many more incidents that have occurred, but it would make this post much longer. At this stage, I cannot tolerate the passive-aggressive conduct. Every interaction with Lex feels like an emotional trap, leaving me to constantly question myself and my relationship. It is draining, and I am starting to feel as though she is playing games to make me feel inferior. It is challenging because I do not wish to hold grudges, yet it is equally difficult to remain silent when I constantly feel undermined. I find myself pondering how I can establish boundaries while still maintaining a connection with my boyfriend's family. Story 5. I, 21F, disagreed with the guy, 25M, I was talking to. Would you date outside your religion? I need relationship advice. I cannot discuss this with my friends because I want an unbiased opinion and guidance, so here I am. Additionally, I enjoy reading stories on Reddit, but this is my first time writing something like this, and English is not my first language. I hope you will bear with me. I, a 21-year-old female, met this 25-year-old male online, and we have been communicating for more than 6 months. We have never met in person, but we plan to do so soon. We just have not found the right time yet. We reside in different countries and come from very different cultures. I think he is an amazing person, and I genuinely like him. Soon, my feelings developed into attraction, and I developed a crush on him. I also know that he feels similarly about me. We both did not want to rush into anything and decided to get to know each other fully, so we did not label our relationship. Here is some context. I am Muslim, somewhat in name only. I am not religious or anything like that. I do not wear a hijab, nor do I have strong opinions about religion. Because of the environment and place in which I grew up, it has just become a belief I am accustomed to culturally. Basically, I am not too involved in it, but I also do not plan to change religions either. I feel that it would be too much. I have never seen the need to change because it has not affected my life significantly. I also evaluate people based on their morals rather than their religion. He, as you might have guessed, does not believe in a specific religion, which I find completely acceptable. He also does not have a favorable view of Muslims and Islam, but again, that is fine with me. As someone who has seen all sides of religion, I understand where he is coming from. Muslims typically do not have a good reputation. Therefore, I comprehend his bias. He is also someone who has a strong idea of the woman he wants to be with. He states that he will never change and knows what he wants. I do believe that for a relationship to succeed, both parties should make compromises occasionally, as nobody is perfect. However, if he has his own set of rules, who am I to judge? The issue is that when the topic of religion arose, he mentioned he would never be with someone who is Muslim. Honestly, I was somewhat disappointed because I feel that is a shallow perspective. I am not someone who would attempt to make someone like me or be with me by changing who I am. While disagreements are acceptable, and I am all for finding common ground and addressing issues together, this is such a core value that I do not think I could take a step back. He stated he understands and that he would never ask anyone to change for him, but he still holds the same view. That is how the discussion concluded. From that moment onward, I gave up hope of being with him and assumed that he shared a similar sentiment. We continued communicating with each other. I thought it was fine since I enjoy his company and our conversations. Neither of us had anyone else special in our lives. Today, while we were talking, he mentioned that he had imagined us being a couple multiple times. It was not the first time he flirted or expressed interest, so I did not take it too seriously. I said, "Well, yes, I have thought about it too, but I do not think we will end up together, especially in the near future and perhaps not even in the long run." He became upset by my response and inquired about the reason. I reminded him of our previous conversation and pointed out that he would not be with a Muslim, and I am Muslim, even though I am not particularly religious. He was upset and disappointed with my words. After that, I must admit, I was somewhat angry and spoke in a stern tone. I asked him why he was acting disappointed when he was the one stating he would not be with someone like me. I should be the one upset since he is the one finding faults with me. I said I was sorry for not being his ideal woman, but he had known about this from the beginning. He mentioned that he thought I would see reason, which made me even more upset. I told him he should not have expected me to change, and I have always accepted him as he is, so he has no right to act in this manner. He also stated that I need to choose a side, and that I should not claim to be Muslim if I am not going to act religiously. He insisted that I should either be fully in or fully out with no middle ground. We went back and forth with a similar conversation. Just to clarify, he never directly asked me to change my religion, but I feel that just because he was not vocal about it does not mean his behavior is acceptable. In the end, we both acknowledged that it was not working, so we should just remain friends and not inquire about anything more between us. That was my intention, but I realize I like him more than I initially thought. After we ended the call, I cried a bit. I know it may seem silly to be upset over losing something I never truly had, but emotions do not always follow logic. I also do not know what I want in this situation. It feels like he does not like me enough to overlook the one flaw I possess. I honestly never thought it was such a significant issue. If we are going to be together, I want him to accept me as I am. On the other hand, after this argument, even if we do end up together and he modifies his beliefs to be with me, I do not know if we would be happy with that arrangement. What do you think of this situation? Please do not suggest advice like, "Oh, cut him off, he is terrible," etc. I still believe he is an incredible person and deserves to be happy, even if it is with someone else. I will also find my own happiness eventually.